are you? I think they're all the same. Lunches are pretty much all.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
How do you feel like the pandemic has affected your community specifically?
I don't know. Because I'm so isolated. I'm so isolated myself that I really don't know.
The city of Kent has been disproportionately challenged by the COVID-19 pandemic and its economic effects.
So March seems like decades ago, and yet it also seems like yesterday.
There's that old saying is when America gets a cold, the African American community gets the flu. And right now we have pneumonia.
Since April, we've had allocated over $100,000 back to the community so that they can be able to survive during this pandemic.
State budget being cut, we lost a lot of funding. We're gonna having those conversations with our legislature at the state level. Like, can you please, keep Kent in mind, keep your communities in mind, local governments in mind when you're making those decisions, because we are deeply impacted by the budget cuts.
Right now, it's like people are making decisions based on their ignorance, but rather than their actual information. And there's so much information out here. It's like you could design whatever train of thought you want. If it's negative, if it's positive, you go online, you can design it however way or avenue you want to think. You can think in one certain way.
And so you see that layer after layer and after layer. And so the challenges definitely is more evident, for people to understand now. So it's good and it's bad at the same time, right?
Kent's largely working class population is known as one of the most culturally diverse in both Western Washington and the greater United States.
Kent is a home of 125 cultures, 125 different languages.
98030, I think, is one of the most diverse zip codes in the United States, is what I read.
We're known as, the 10th most diverse city in the nation.
As we know, we're the 10th most diverse in the U.S., and we hear that term constantly.
So somebody will come in here and they'll be like, oh my God, I ain't never seen a black lifeguard before.
Kent is the 10th most diverse community in the United States. And so with the diversity, often what we have seen is a lot of times diversity also goes hand in hand with low income, and oftentimes because of kind of systemic racism and inherent other issues, systemic issues, families find themselves more vulnerable, especially when something like a pandemic hits.
When you serve a community that has a high concentration of people of color, you can't help but be involved in issues regarding race and social justice. And so, one of the things that I'm trying to get our message out on is we have been doing these things for a long time, and we're looking to continue to grow there.
In a time of increasing unemployment, social isolation, food insecurity, and efforts to dismantle systemic racism and inequity, the leaders of Kent have been working overtime.
For my position in particular, it is honestly, we do COVID 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
We didn't have a plan per se to respond to a pandemic.
And I think no one was prepared for the changes that we witnessed and we lived through and are currently still living through, especially in our education system.
Right, every decision you make impacts somebody's life, and not that it didn't before, but this is a new in a new way, and we as a community are trying to figure this out together. There's not a guidebook. We can look back at 1918 and go, what did they do then? But there's nothing in our time, in our lifetime, that says these are the 4 steps you should take.
We fed 650,000 meals since March over the summer. We were able to use our transportation vehicles to support them. We provided thousands of digital devices. Teaching and learning occurred even though we were building the plane as we were flying. But the reality is, this is our new normal.
There's a lot of new laws related to safety protocols, related to you mandating a mask in your building, and what does that look like, and how do you communicate with your employees from an HR level about, are you sick, knowing the questions to ask. So I think it's just kind of change the way that you do business, no matter if you're big or small, because no one knew this pandemic was going to happen, and definitely not last this long.
Demand on the Kent Food Bank has been multiplied by 10 since March, with thousands of local families seeking emergency aid. A new association called the Kent Community Partners has risen to fill this need, and over 50 local nonprofits and churches are on board. They meet twice a week on Zoom.
And so when COVID hit, what I did was started making phone calls. Service clubs and nonprofits that I'd connected with and knew people that might be interested in a conversation. And so the whole thing kind of started organically and grew from there.
We looked at the different options on how to address that. We knew that the food bank simply couldn't scale up big enough to address the pressing issues. And so the community rallied together to address the issues in a way that really, right now we're unloading a semi of 28 pallets, about 40,000 pounds of food. We do that every week. In addition, we get other food. All total, the groups that we are a part of bring in just short of 200,000 pounds of food on an average week.
We stepped into the space as World Relief, even though we're a development organization that serves refugees and vulnerable immigrants. We wanted to step into this space. I felt like the need was great, especially with this pandemic. So many of the families don't have an active social network, especially if they're newcomers. So they don't have a social network to reach out to. Many did not qualify for other governmental aid or even unemployment, because if you're a newcomer, you cannot get unemployment. And so the need was great, and we wanted to make sure people would stay housed. And in order to do that, if we could provide aid with food and really high dollar items like diapers, feminine hygiene products, laundry soap, as well as some of those other things that cost. If you have 2 kids in diapers, it's almost $100 a week. So that money could be kind of directed towards rent or utility costs. And so then families could stay housed a little bit longer during this time that's so precarious for so many newcomers. We have been serving consistently well over 800 families per week.
No one should go hungry. And there's no reason why anyone should be without food. Because of the resources that are actually here, Community Network Council being one great resource, they go all out trying to help just about any and every family.
One of the things that I love about working here is that we're so community-based and community-driven that we don't assume what people need. We go to the community and we ask them, what do you need right now? What does that look like? What does aid look like to you? Instead of just sitting in a room with a bunch of other people who haven't lost their jobs, are not worrying about their next bill, are not worrying about how they're going to get food to the table, and just assuming what the community wants. We go to the community and ask them, what do you need?
Produce, meat, dairy, masks, hand sanitizer, and diapers are being gathered and distributed in record numbers.
So today is grab and go groceries. I know, I'm very excited about it. We have our volunteers. They go to the cars, they find out their names, we find out how many people's in their household. We tell them to pump the trunk, and we just put groceries in there. We do that every single week.
Usually the walk-ups are usually homeless people. We call them that, and we just set aside groceries for them. We usually put cereal, milk, snacks. Sometimes we have hot meals here, and so we bring them here, they come and walk up, and then we have extra. We take it to the Berry in Transit, and we go ahead and feed the homeless out there as well.
And so it's like constantly coordination between different entities and bodies. And so it's always moving. It's not just like maybe food banks have different systems that they've built up over years, but ours is a temporary. We're not going to build a giant refrigerator building. Everything has to come and go, like mob and demob each week.
Bread, and we don't have to offer them additional bread. But as soon as we are done with these bags, which will happen fairly quickly, we switch to those boxes. And when we do, we give bread,
extra bread,
and box. Not extra, just bread, because they don't have it.
Many of these organizations are working in emergency food distribution for the first time, with dozens of volunteers coming out of unemployed and retired populations. But they are united by the mission to feed Kent.
So right now, I think it's the best thing that could have ever happened was COVID. I really hate to say that, but it has brought this Kent community together.
It's a unique engagement that we've had with government, with nonprofit, with faith communities, setting aside all our differences to do something together and focus on one thing.
They're not asking any questions. They're not asking about your race, your citizenship status. They're not asking about what maybe party you belong to or anything. They're just helping you because as a human being you need the support right now. So
for me, I would like for businesses to understand that the folks that are on the ground and doing the work and putting together, like Brenda Farwell, putting together these phone calls, these are the businesses that you should be supporting, right? Do we want support here at the chamber? Yes. But are we boots on the ground, 7 a.m, pulling out fruit boxes, going over 10,000 pounds of potatoes no, we're not doing that, right? And so I just want businesses to know that the things that you don't see, the disparity that you don't see in your community is because of those organizations.
We have seen that people are coming in families, meaning cis male and women and their kids. They're coming in to come and people from all different walks of life and all nationalities are coming in, and that's actually really encouraging that they are not limiting themselves. That this is a organization that's mostly helping queer and trans people from Pacific Islanders, but our reach is going further, and that is really inspiring actually.
But we have served over 13,000 families, which is an incredible number of people. And for many of these families, it's the very first time that they have ever needed or asked for help, because these are unprecedented times. But I think part of this process, again, for us working together, this Kent Community Partners working together, is to find solution of how to make sustainable solutions for families so that we are not having to pass out food 6 months down the road, that families are able to stand on their own. What are some solutions that we can come up together so people can be re-employed, maybe new businesses started, so that that economic empowerment is available for all of the families, so that we're not doing this a year down the road.
But the million-dollar question is, what organization or what partners will continue to provide these services in the fall? Maybe it's Amazon Fresh, maybe it's Instacart. We don't know yet, but that's something we got to figure out.
Though a moratorium on evictions has protected many vulnerable residents, several support organizations are starting to shift focus into emergency rental assistance.
We're calling it the tsunami.
The tsunami of evictions.
The tsunami of evictions.
So what are we going to do? What do we do?
That can keep me up at night, to be real honest with you. So I'm hoping and praying that they're going to extend this moratorium and allow people more time to come up with the plan. I mean, even if they start back to work, how do you pay the past? And people have been getting agencies like ours and other churches in the area to try to keep up, but that's not paying the full rent every month.
There's renters that are not able to pay their rent, and so the eviction moratorium is 100% the right thing to do. There are property owners that are also not able to pay their mortgages. So where does that come into play? Where's the assistance for those folks? So working with state lawmakers on what does that look like, and how do we make sure we're supporting both sides of the system?
I think the economy will continue to be impacted for quite some time. There's been a fair amount of resources that have been injected into the community in support of this current situation. Eventually some of those resources will fall off the table. And so as the rent moratoriums are lifted and as some of the food supplies that we currently depend on maybe start to run out, then it'll really be a test of how well this community works together.
How about the senior who rely on people to care for them? Or individuals with disabilities who live on a very low income, like a Social Security, and have a hard time to pay for their rent or food, right? Or you're talking about the immigrants who still have limited English proficiencies and don't understand the culture, don't know about a system, right? So they rely on organizations like us to help them, to assist them. And yet, if we don't even get the funding to support them, as a result, these are the most vulnerable population. They will continue to be left out from the resources that were set out to care for them.
I know there's so much trust that needs to be built with the community and government agencies. And so we want to be that middle person that can come in and say, you know, we want to support you. We want to pay for your rent. And I know this funding is coming from, you know, A, B, or C, but we want to be that voice that you can trust. You know, we've been building a relationship with a lot of these people that I think coming in and being that person to advocate to the community, we can be able to continue to provide that service for folks.
The action around food and housing equity in Kent has come hand in hand with the fight for racial justice in local government and policing. The Black Lives Matter rally in mid-June was attended by over 1,000 people. City officials and the Kent Police helped to facilitate the march, and many public leaders spoke alongside the families of victims of police brutality in King County.
In the midst of all of this, we are now reintroduced to a virus that's not so new for this country, but the virus of racism that has emerged in a mighty way along parallel tracks, which is also a fundamental component that we're leading through as well.
The combination of the COVID along with the Black Lives Matter movement has really caused people to rethink some of the perspectives that they have about society and the world in general. And as a result of that thinking, have maybe taken a different approach to what they might be able to do for their community. And I think that's been a very great thing.
The numbers are all over the place. Some people say there's 12 to 1,500. Some people say it was almost over 2,000. I say I can assure you there was over 1,000 people walking the streets of Kent on a hot sunny day, chanting Black Lives Matter, chanting we want justice, chanting defund the police, chanting, you know, reinvest in our communities. And those 1,000 people alone can really put someone in a position in the city of Kent so that their voices can be heard.
I want to start by saying I think that was a tremendous event in the history of our city. And I'm very proud of how the entire process went from beginning to end.
The chief and I were very clear from the beginning, we want to be a part of this. We want to walk alongside of people. And I do think that the majority of people received it with the intent that it was meant, this was us standing alongside, not because it was the right political thing to do, it was because it was the right thing to do.
People they're becoming more aware. They're open to having a conversation about racial inequities. They're open to having a conversation about injustices happening all over the country, all over the world. And they're, even if they don't understand, they're willing to listen. And that's been good in a way, because we had a Black Lives Matter rally here in Kent, right here in this spot, and that was pretty impressive to see people from, even if they felt uncomfortable being in that room, they were here.
The irony was, when I walked into City Hall and walked around, guess who I passed? I passed dozens of police officers who were asked not to be visible during that time, and for appropriate and reasonable reasons. The optics were that this is a time for the people to celebrate, to process, to be together, right? The esprit de corps to help celebrate the notion that we have to be better, that these viruses are coexisting.
Looking back at that time, what was going around the country and in our state was that a lot of the protests were being overrun and somewhat overshadowed by the element that came in and wanted to do property destruction and violence. And that is really unfortunate. It detracts from the message that was an important message that needed to be heard in some instances. As a chief, I have to look at the totality of what could happen and plan for everything. So while we hope for an absolute peaceful protest, we have to be geared up for the other to come as well, the other elements. So, but very early on, the mayor and I were absolute that we were going to embrace this. Our mentality was we were watching protests be done, if you will, kind of having a protest done to your city. And we didn't want that. We are part of our community and we were going to be there. So we knew we were going to be involved. We knew we were going to march. And what was also very nice is that when we met with Kendrick and the organizers, they invited us to speak, which I think is very telling in terms of truly wanting to hear from all the perspectives, so that we can be united against it in favor of reform and change.
Both the mayor and chief of police faced vocal criticism about an ongoing lawsuit against the King County executive, Dow Constantine, and his new proposed inquest process for instances of police brutality.
I'm ready to listen, I'm ready to hear, and I know that we have to do this together. And I'm going to say it one more time, flat and flatter. If it matters, drop the lawsuit! Drop the lawsuit!
Our leadership is not as open to our community as you would think. They're open to other leaders in the community having these conversations and us acting as liaisons on these conversations. But when there really comes opportunities for people who have been hurt, we're talking about people who, when I say they are traumatized by some of the things that are going on in our city, and our leadership is not giving them a true ear, that's a problem. Like, of course they're going to lash out and they're going to yell and scream when they get the opportunity to, because when are they going to see you again?
A youth-led activist group called 442 has highlighted the dropping of this lawsuit in their list of demands for the city, which also include the defunding of the Kent Police Department and a redistribution of resources toward students, youth, and Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. Both Mayor Ralph and Chief Padilla maintain that there are misunderstandings about this lawsuit.
It's an extremely complicated legal discussion, and I think that's part of why there's a lot of misinformation out there about it. Really high level, it's about the question, does the King County Executive have the authority to unilaterally change the inquest process?
The challenge is that the King County Executive, Dow Constantine, has developed rules for that are a huge departure from what we used to have. Now, we all believe that there's room for reform and growth, and many of the things that have changed we agree upon. But there are some rule of law things and some safeguards that have been eroded away. And they are all on the side of the police officer in terms of not having protections that we would afford anyone else.
What I would like to see personally is a statewide process. There should be something that is uniform across the state that addresses these situations, so all families know what to expect, all police departments know what to expect. Right now in Auburn, they're partially in Pierce County, partially in King County, depending on where an incident would occur, completely different rules. So really would like to see a uniform process so everyone involved knows what that looks like. But we've gotten away from what an inquest was set up to do.
I am very thankful that our leadership, mayor and chief, took it upon themselves to, be a part of that movement, and I'm also thankful that the crowd responded in the way that they did, because it was their true, authentic voice. And you never walk away from your constituents' voice, because they're the reason why you're doing this work. So don't always think that everybody is going to like the work that you're doing because of the position that you're in. You're going to get some boos and you're going to get some cheers. That's just how it's going to work. As a leader, it's upon you to say, now, how do I respond to both? Right? The response to what happened that day is still null and void. It was just like nothing. I'm glad our city showed up the way they did and spoke their truth in the way they did, because that was the first and only time they ever had an opportunity to do that.
At this moment, many are in agreement that the leadership in Kent needs to continue to diversify and better reflect the population of the city. Kent has a historically low voter turnout for local elections, typically drawing less than 10% of the residential population to vote for the offices of mayor and city council. Community leaders are hopeful that future elections will attract more young voters specifically.
At that march and rally, people didn't even recognize the leadership that was there. But they were so frustrated that when you said, oh, this is an appointed council member or city, like they would scream, like, because that was the first time they ever been in front of people like that. So they wanted to have their voices being heard. 90% of the people at that march, probably that was their first time seeing Mayor Ralph.
I've seen a lot of youth get engaged this year, and I'm hopeful that maybe they'll get more involved in our elections. They will vote and they will run for office.
Get excited for the people who represent you, and you know the person gonna do something for you to share your perspective. If you have those candidates there, people will come. I believe that.
I love the idea of being involved in a community that we're the 10th most diverse. What I don't like and what I want people to realize is that when you start looking at leadership, what does our percentage look like as it relates to leadership? And are the people that are of color, does their voice actually matter? Are they supported within the community?
Is because it's diversified, we're trying to bring more diversity through Kent and a lot of our support systems, making sure that's diversified. Because it's no good for us having all these great things and we're still not making sure that we're reaching the different cultures with that.
When you look at leadership, you in the city of Kent, and I'm talking about just a picture of what our city council looks like, a picture of what our mayor's department look like, a picture of what the police force looks like. Those pictures do not represent what Kent really is. So if you look at those pictures, just the staff alone, you would automatically assume that Kent is a heavily white city, right? But that's farthest from the truth, because we pride ourselves on being diverse, but we don't represent it in our leadership level.
Diversity brings different opinions, brings different perspective, and that enrich and broaden our views, our world views, our values, to examine ourselves and to understand others, and also, first of all, also understand yourself, where you're coming from. Do you even know why you are thinking this way? Right? And diversity brings healthy conversations if people are willing to come together, be willing to have curiosity to learn from each other, and respectful, and also know who owns the power and has a sincerity, wants to make changes, and have the attitude to learn and be willing to open up their mindset and to hear from others. And of course, it's always hard to give up is the power. Because true partnership is a shared power decision making and shared resources, not being the gatekeeper, not be the one just come to ask questions and then I would think about it. Thank you very much for your good feedback. And that's a very good question. We will think about that.
Prominent leaders of color in Kent have been speaking out about the discrimination they have experienced, as well as expressing their support for young leaders coming from minority backgrounds.
So racism, what has happened? Would I say that it's racist? Black codes, racist tropes that have come through about, let's just say, someone said that I stole $27 million. Not that there was a budget shortfall before I arrived, literally 3 years before I arrived. I was indicted, not literally, but by the public. This is the first time where my integrity was called into question. When people said, we want to see your tax returns because we believe you were receiving stipends when you were supposed to be at work. I mean, it was that that focused. I mean, it was a campaign, if you will, and I would argue it still is. And then I had to shift my line of thinking. So why are these people saying this, right? Why are they thinking this? And I had to, again, draw upon my ancestors and my family when they said, when people want to do you harm, for the simple reason of doing you harm, no, that's not about you. Know and understand that is not about you. That is about them.
So the other day when we were on our call, we're about 15 minutes into the call, and I hear someone use the N-word. And my first thought was, I think someone's phone isn't on mute and they may be having a private conversation that no one should be hearing. Not that I agree with it, but I thought it was just someone had a Freudian slip. And I'm like, oh, you're not on mute. We're not on mute, people, right? So then it just took over. They took over our screens. They were showing videos of some of the most horrendous things that I've ever seen. I've never seen a person hung before. Being a black woman and myself, watching another black woman be hung was absolutely devastating. They were calling me racial slurs, calling my presenter, who happens to be an Asian American, racial slurs. And it's crazy because you think as a professional, you can move, I'm pretty agile, right? But I didn't even have the strength to be able to, in the call, I got confused, I got nervous, I got scared, mostly for the other people and how they're affected by this, but then they're worried about how I'm affected by it. So it turned into very unfortunate situation. And it's been a couple of days now, and every day I feel like emotionally it's getting a little bit more difficult. I'm so sorry. In all of my life, I have treated people with kindness on every level. And to be treated in such a way, I had a staff of 5. I had to lay everyone off when COVID-19 hit, and it was just me. So working 17, 18 hours a day to keep people's businesses afloat, to then have someone try to bring the value of that down. It wasn't just about me, and it wasn't just about the racial comments. It's about, I am literally saving businesses from going out of business. And now I have to deal with this issue because I just can't let this happen. I just can't sit back and say, oh, this was unfortunate. I have to do something about it, right? And so these are conversations that folks don't really want to have. They don't want to be involved in it because it's a different level of, it kind of taps into your core of who you are as a person. And businesses have enough to deal with that now we have to have these conversations. And, it's not Zoom's fault. I mean, they're just trying to provide a product. You can't blame Zoom for what people are doing. These are just racist people that are out to hurt people, right? But how can now I have to figure out, how do I protect my businesses? There's another layer of protection that I have to put on. There's another layer of due diligence that I have to use with going online and being exposed. I don't have the manpower to check everyone in, and it's going to take a lot of work, right? So it's just added another, on top of COVID-19, it's added another issue, I guess, for people.
Taking a look at the community that I was giving myself to, the community that I did not grow up in, but I grew to love, right? I live here, I play here, I eat here, I shop here, my kids are here. It's like, when I'm invested like that, I want to see some type of change to, if my daughters want to stay around here and call this home for life, then I want them to be able to say that they live in a city that's, comfortable for them. And right now, it's not.
And while it is very diverse, there's a difference between diversity and inclusion. And there's still a power structure that is largely white, largely conservative. And that's not not much different than most other what I would call smaller cities or towns, if you will, across the country.
Just from the Kent School District alone, our young kids of color are not graduating at the same rate of their peers. They're 5 more times likely to be suspended versus one of their white peers. They're 10 times less likely to be in an honors or an IP class or IB class. They're 10 times more likely to be referred to the juvenile justice system than one of their white counterparts. I mean, these numbers are not made up. They are real. Like, Kent is the second leading referral agency to the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office for juveniles and young adults.
At this time in the United States, we have a lot of media that's happening. The media is putting out these messages that I think are driving people apart, right? And I think that, on grown-ups, yeah, it happens, but I'm not really as concerned. I think people should really look and see what the impact is on their children, right? Grown-ups, we all know. We've already picked a team, most of us, right? You've already picked what you're interested in. You've already picked what you like. But I would just ask people, really think about what is going on with the children, right? The children still have to go to school together. The children still have to work together. The children still have to teamwork, all the group projects and such. I would hope that the community would actually take some time to talk to their kids about what's going on, regardless of how you feel about the topic. Just teach your kid to understand and to teach your kid to be able to work with people who may or may not have differing visions or different ideas on, the impact of things. Because that's something you're seeing a lot of, right? You see a lot of, parents saying stuff and kids are hearing it and, not understanding that that's what they think. But hey, whatever you think is fine, but you still need to treat people with respect. And I think that we should make a conscious effort to head that off for harmony for the kids, because like I said, you can't pull your kid out of life. Grown-ups, you typically know when to be quiet and when to speak or whatever, but kids don't know. So I think that's one thing I would like to say. I mean, we need to strive for longer term harmony than, this issue with COVID and this issue with, everything that's going on with regard to racial justice and equity.
Mm-hmm. But what does an online class look like when you're in 2nd grade or 4th grade?
Well, usually it's like Zoom. It's very terrible. There's you do Zoom
Mine's
classes.
1 hour 30 minutes Zoom.
You don't get anything.
1 hour 30 minutes. Well, there's really nothing to do on Zoom, so a lot of people, they just turn off their camera and mute
and meet
themselves and then
themselves.
just play games all day while they're just
Wow, I'm really appreciating this honesty.
All of this social discourse will now be a part of the fabric of children's experience in the Kent School District, which for the fall term will be taking place with entirely remote instruction.
Survey data, 55% of our families felt uncomfortable or very uncomfortable sending their children back to school in an in-person setting. 67% of our KEA, our teachers and support staff, said that they feel uncomfortable or very uncomfortable returning to work in an in-person setting. 41%. So we looked at all points of our survey data. 41% of our families said that they felt uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable sending their children back to school in full remote. So we did have some naysayers. But the reality is, while we had 3 options that were available to us, given the parameters and the safety and wellness and health factors that were number 1 priority, we really only had 1 choice.
Many organizations are preparing to tackle the growing challenges of educating the community as a whole.
The assumption is that in a digital world, all these families have computers, all these families have internet access, and there's a digital divide there. Not all families have computer access, and not all of them have internet access.
It's going to be online education. And one of the things that my families that's coming here is telling me is that, what do I do if I'm a single parent? I got 5 or 6 kids. I got to go to work. And now I got to figure out, how do I train my kids with the virtual? I don't even speak English. My kids speak English. I don't speak English. So how do I support them if they're going to no longer be at school?
How do we keep kids physically fit? A couple of teachers have said, we saw students in between the COVID time and now, and they've gained weight. One teacher told me one of her students gained like 40 pounds. And so how do we keep them engaged? And maybe setting up some stations in the parking lot, like noon, bring your family here. 3 o'clock, because we know different times, family needs different times. Seeing how we can utilize our outdoor space in the park system.
When a kid already had a history of not being the most focused or being a distraction, it's only exacerbated by being in an online environment. But there's always a person of focus, right? Anytime you have Zoom or whatever, the big picture shows up because you're the person in focus. So it's only natural for the people who are not in focus to zoom out.
We've got like over 200 and something laptops that we put together. Home Street Bank helped put it together. We got the software from Microsoft. Refurbishing program. We refurbished those computers and we handed it out to the community so they could have access when we wanted to do Microsoft Teams or we wanted to do Zoom or any of those technologies that we're using.
That's one of the next challenges that Kingdom Gathering is about to go and start dealing with is the literacy part. How do I support the parents? How do we now support the parents that does not speak English and help them work through the virtual support system? If they are at work and they can't be there for their children, how do we partner with other nonprofits that can support and we begin to come together and be a school system together and be able to help each other to help the parents?
So the challenge is access to quality instruction, access for our teachers, high quality professional development, because teaching in this environment is vastly different. Yes, we have some great examples. I've heard the phrase here, Mr. Rogers is probably the best example of what virtual learning could look like, but that's not what we're aiming for, right? Our goal is to make sure, and hear me when I say, this is not a substitute for in-person instruction. It's not. It never will be. Does it have its place? Certainly. Is there an opportunity for flipped learning to allocate time in a different way so I can provide a lesson for our students and our staff so that they can learn and teach at increasingly more effective levels, and then our students can actually be introduced to the academic knowledge and skills before the instruction occurs. Those are examples of how we might use this technology. But I will say this, as pleased as we are for this opportunity and as challenging as it is, it will never take the place of in-person instruction.
Morale for the future is mixed across the board.
Most people right now are just kind of here. So the change curve starts up here where it's like the change has happened, right? And then people are sad, and then they're angry, and then they're confused, and then you start having your change agents, which are the people who begin to pivot. And so learning how many people, how you can be at the top and you're a change agent, and then quickly you can go back down to being angry and depressed.
Our community are happy people, and for the most part, we haven't been able to just show any type of affection. We are huggers, we can't even do that anymore because we want to make sure that everybody's safe, and we want to see more of these folks in the future.
There's been a lot of people out here that have lost hope, they're depressed, and so we're just throwing a line of hope, throwing a line of life to help people to just get through the week and each day.
I have, my morale's good. I still love my job. I still believe it's an honor to come here every day and work to serve the people of community. And that's not hyperbole. I'm actually that guy, right? I actually care. Kent is my community, and Kent's people are my people, bottom line. I will say that it's been tough. It's been tough, and that there are days where it seems as though everything you've worked for in your career has been forgotten, right, or been erased, and there isn't any recognition from a very small minority of the percentage of people that make it to my email and other source or ways to get a hold of us. A very small percentage want to frame the discussion in a way where there's no recognition that we've been working really hard, and that we're not starting from zero. We're not starting from a culture and a relationship with our community that is broken and needs a complete revamp or cutting overhaul.
Oh, I'm going to take a big deep breath before I answer that question. We're all hanging in there. because we have jobs to do and we need to move forward. I would lie if I told you that I didn't go home and cry, that I have not had my days where I shut the door here and I cry. I cry for my community and for everything that's happening, and because I'm tired, right? This is exhausting work. It's heavy work, but it needs to continue and it needs to move on. So it's figuring out, how do you find the bright spots in the day? How do you laugh with each other? We're all feeling isolated, and it feels like we're doing so much stuff alone. And so really focusing on how do we get through this together? How do we laugh a little? I'm super lucky. I've got a great family that will let me sit and cry for only so long before they, give me a poke and say, come on, we're going to figure this out. And I really do believe we're going to figure it out, but I am worried for my community because they are isolated, and problems are so much bigger when you face them alone.
I think what I've learned about leadership during this time is that it's okay to step back and say that you don't know. And it's okay to take a back seat sometimes, I think a lot of times I've been in meetings and I've been talking to other organizations, even with me being Somali, they'll ask me, like, what does the Somali community think about this? And it's like, I don't speak for all of them. I can go back to them and ask, and they take a back seat and hear what they want to say and come back to you. But that I can't be the spokesperson for everybody. It's just sometimes you have to be humble enough to take a back seat, and just, because I think a lot of times with leadership is like, people look at you and just assume that you have all the answers. And I think sometimes you have to recognize that you don't, and that's okay, and to work on that.
Speaking in uncertain times, these are their calls to action.
We have to keep this going. We got to be an example for all the rest of the places. Let us be the template to show people what it looks like to bring diversity together.
Know that your police department is open, and I'm an email, everything that I have is published. I'm an email away.
Call to action will be voting, putting our mayor, Mrs. Ralph, in office. She's done a lot for this community, so I'd say voting, especially in this time. No one's working, no school, so we're all canvassing, trying to figure out who we could put in office to support this community.
You got to learn and vote. Yeah, I think just you vote and be willing to get engaged. Be willing to get engaged, because this is going to be their life. Me probably halfway to grave, so it probably won't matter me too much. But for them as a young people, this is their future, right?
So what is your reason why? What's your why? What's your as Representative John Lewis would say, what is your finding the way to get in the way look like? Because what he said is you've got to find a way to get in the way of status quo. You got to find a way to get in the way of racism, of racial injustice, of educational injustice. That's what we're here for. That doesn't matter with the color of your skin or your gender or belief system or who you love or who you pray to. It doesn't matter.
Everyone's coming from a little different place, depending whether you run a small business, a large business, a community organization, whether you're currently still employed or not, whether your family has the internet or not. So everybody's in a little different place. And I think we need to be respectful of everybody's differences and where they're coming from. And if everyone just kind of takes a step towards the middle on everybody's perspective, not to abandon your own perspective and truth, but just to be a little bit more helpful in understanding somebody else's, I think that will bode well for our community as we work together in the long run.
Sometimes it takes a crisis to make good things happen, but oh my goodness, our churches are working together, our service clubs are working together, our nonprofits are working together, all of these unlikely relationships that have been formed. And my hope is that once we're through this, and we will get through this, I know that work continues, right? That we continue to figure out how we don't have to separate up into our little, we just take care of this group and we just do that, but we keep it broad and know that that's the best way to serve our community.
For me, call to action is make sure that we're giving them the information, give them the truth. Teach them about food and nutrition. Teach them about being an entrepreneur. Teach them about finances. Because these people, most of me, even me when I was growing up, I didn't know much about that stuff.
I would encourage people to volunteer, to show for different nonprofits that are doing the work in our community, and to help them financially if you're able to.
More so just less talking and more doing. That's pretty much, literally, we just need more people to come out and do what they say they're gonna do.
Hang together. Everybody cooperate. Everybody do what you can. If you just, each one of us do what we can, it'll make a difference. I think so too.
What interests me most about Kent and why I came to this job is because of the diversity in the community and the difference of that there's this huge kind of wealth gap. So I get asked all the time for our annual fund drive, go hit up all the rich people in Kent. I'm like, what rich people in Kent? How many are there? Like, maybe. So as a community, we have to come together to do a little bit more. Say we lack this that you might have seen in Seattle or Renton or Tukwila. What I see is this community comes together.
That if we really learn how to work together, it's kind of like the fable of the stone soup. That everybody pitches in a little bit and you have this beautiful soup at the end that everybody can share. I think that's kind of the lesson to be learned from that is any one group or any one individual might not have all the resources, but working together, we can multiply it and we're powerful together.
I think the biggest thing I'm just trying to say is don't lose hope. There is hope out there. There is people on your side. There is people working towards having a better future for this country and this city and this county and this state. Easier said than done, but it is a possibility.
Hey, what's up? It's Logan Ellis here. Thank you so much for watching this film about Kent. I really appreciate all the people that contributed to it, and even though there were only about 40 people that I interviewed, I really hope that more people come and join us as a part of this story. So if you want to do that, you can comment below, you can subscribe for more updates, or you can email me directly if you want to talk. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.